So I'm trying to make a character for our next campaign, and I can't decide if I want to place. Well, I can't decide which class to choose. I want to do something that
Okay.
has defensive capabilities. I could
Hmm.
protect my friends, but I also want to hit really hard and like attack a lot. Be really good with weapons.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe have like a little bit of like battlefield control in there, like DPS, tanking, damage, and I also
Yeah.
want to be kind of useful outside of combat too. Like if ideally I'd be able to have some charisma or maybe some abilities that'll help with talking. I'm just really slumped. I don't know what
Hmm.
to do.
Honestly, it sounds like you're describing a fighter, which is exactly what this video is about. We're going to be talking about getting the most out of your fighters in Dungeons and Dragons.
Everybody, welcome back to Wednesday. I'm Josh. This is Jake. We're JNJtabletop. And today we are starting a brand new series. We are going to be telling you how to make a fighter, specifically this time, but in other videos, just any sort of class that you'd like to play. Um, so I'm really excited to get started on this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to get into a little bit of some of the mechanics and then a lot of like character building and ideas and that kind of stuff. So I'm stoked for it, and I love fighters.
Yeah, we're
But
even going to talk about some examples of fighters towards the end of the video, so make sure you stick around.
yeah, and then we also have timestamps in the doobly doo. So if you want to check the timestamps, then just bloop bloop, do that whole thing. So, Jake, what's a fighter? What are they good at?
Well, I know this might come as a surprise to some, but fighters are good at fighting. So, what does that mean? they're good at hitting things hard. They're good at being resilient. I say that because I feel like the distinction between a fighter and a barbarian, like a barbarian, you just keep hitting them, and it's like it almost doesn't phase them. Whereas a fighter will take the hit, but they have ways to bounce back, which is a little bit like a different slant on that, and I really like that. And then they even get some ways to just avoid damage and status effects altogether. So they are just incredible. And I know we were talking about this a little bit in the while we were preparing for this. Like, I can't think of another class except for maybe the rogue that just has this wide open canvas that you could just use to just flavor your fighter and like just create and tell the story that you really want to. It's like just any background is open. Any there's just so much there. I love fighters.
I totally agree. I mean, they always get marked as like vanilla or boring or just like one sided, one dimensional. And there's just so much versatility for fighters. You could literally do whatever you want. And we'll talk a little bit about how like mechanics wise, how you can, I guess, later on. Um, but that's actually one of the things that I would say makes them unique is their extreme versatility. You could literally do whatever you want with a
Mm.
fighter, backstory wise, and also just mechanic wise, as far as like fighting and like combat and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
But
I don't think actually the fighter gets more attacks in a round, or at least potentially, depending on how high level you go, than any other class. I mean, if you take your fighter all the way to level 20, you take the attack action. You don't take 2 attacks. You take 4.
yeah,
Then your
plus
action. Then your action surge.
yeah,
It's just like so. Let me get this straight. You used your great weapon master 8 times in a single round. It's like, oh yeah, and then the wizard hasted you, so let's do it again. Why not? Yeah.
yeah,
So you want to talk about just you're you're just like the most consistent, reliable damage dealer that the game has, and I think other classes do really cool things, but the fighter, the reliability, and just the raw output potential is just off the charts.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do a lot of damage in D&D, but I would say the classic and going about things just like straightforward, the best way to deal the most damage would be to play a fighter. Um, it's just consistent, solid. smack the crap out of you, regardless of what subclass you take.
Yeah, so speaking of subclasses, the fighter has quite the range as well. So what are some of your favorite subclasses, and maybe you got an example of two, or of how you played one in the past?
Sure. So my favorite subclass, uh, probably one of the best subclasses, if not the best subclass, is going to be Battle Master.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, with Battle Master, essentially you get a bunch of different maneuvers that you could choose from, on top of some other like little fun things. But the main thing is going to be your maneuvers, and that could be anything from rolling a superiority die and adding that to your attack roll to make sure that you hit,
Ugh,
knocking an enemy prone.
so good. Precision attack. Just a quick side note.
Yeah.
For anybody that uses feats and you're looking at your Great Weapon Master and you're a Battle Master fighter, if you have precision attack, roll with Great Weapon Master, because you can always, if you miss, you might only be a point or two off. Oh, here comes that precision attack. But the thing that I love about that is just behaviorally how you approach that decision. You're going to take that chance more often, and you'll succeed there more often because you're trying more often. And then if you barely fail, you'll still make it succeed. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
It's just do it.
It's really nice. But and that's just some of the versatility too, where like you look at Battle Master and you're like, all right, maneuvers. So like you're just adding superiority to hit harder. And it's like, well, yeah, you can do a pushing attack to push someone further. You can do a tripping attack to do more damage and knock someone down. You can do a frightening attack to do more damage and make someone afraid. But don't even think of it as I'm doing more damage. Look at the battlefield control aspect of that.
Oh yeah, if you make someone afraid, they can't move closer to you.
Yep.
If you're a ranged fighter, how awesome is that?
One of my favorite characters I ever played was a polearm master fighter, and I know what you guys are probably thinking. Oh, polearm master is broken. You know, whatever. Well, okay, you know, say what you want to say.
It's a little broken.
It's
a little broken.
Okay.
It's great though.
But what's so much fun about that is it let me approach fighters from a different angle. So I had always thought, you know, the first character I ever played was a sword and board paladin, and it was a lot of like I'm just walking up to something and hitting it, and I was like, yeah, I like playing ranged characters because I don't like just running in and hitting things. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to play a fighter. He's going to use a halberd. And then I started looking at Battle Master and I was like, there's so many options here. That's kind of what I was saying before. Like there's battlefield control options as far as frightening people, knocking them down, pushing them away to get them out of the fight. If you're a polearm master and you're using your pushing attack, well, if they walk back up to you, you get to use your reaction to make an opportunity attack on them because they enter your reach.
Even more attacks, more damage.
Exactly.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, and like the tactics that can go into that is just, for me, it was so much fun. Like every move that I made was intentional. There were reasons that I was thinking 6 moves ahead for why I would move to that one spot in the middle.
Absolutely. That's a big reason, or a big thing that would separate them from the barbarian. Not that the barbarian can't be tactical, because of course there's tactics to whatever you do. But a fighter's supposed to, their mind is as just as much of a weapon as any other part of their training. And I love fighters.
And even something like that, you could think of it as like tanking too. So you're just talking about the barbarian, right? The barbarian is what everyone thinks of as a tank. Well, the fighter might be able to tank, but do it a little differently. And some of that could be exactly what I just mentioned. Maybe you have the sentinel feat. You know, maybe you are, I forget exactly which one it is, but there's something that you could make someone hit you instead of someone else. Or you could have your friend have that and you have the sentinel feat. Now you're going to hit them. And now you're just like,
yeah,
you set things up a certain way so that you're always doing something, and that's what a fighter would do.
Even just the fighting styles, right? Barbarians don't they don't get them.
Yep.
Paladins do, rangers do. The fighter gets them, and the protection
Osprey
fighting
too.
style. Yeah, the fight. Yep, yeah. Depending if you take, I think it's champion. Um, but yeah, you take the protection fighting style, and now you can make sure that you have to attack me. If you attack someone next to that's not me, disadvantage. That's another way
Yep.
to tank.
And that's also a battle master thing too, is you could I forget exactly what it is. It's like a taunt. So they have disadvantage to attack anyone except for you. What's the range on that? You know, do that on someone on the other side of the battlefield when you're an archer. Now suddenly the big bad has disadvantage to attack everyone else except
Yep.
for you.
And speaking of archers,
Yeah.
That's what I'm playing right now in Ancient Relics, Hokey Religions. I went with an Eldritch Knight. I did that intentionally to be different and weird instead of the Arcane Archer, but
Classic.
I'm playing a ranged fighter. And there's a ton of cool stuff that he can do. And with having the spells like shield and stuff, I get hit all the time, but then I don't get hit because I just go shield. Shield. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And just looking at your character too, that just goes to say more about the versatility of the fighter. Because I could confidently say that I could confidently say that there is not another fighter like Vale.
That's probably true.
You know, like you use an Eldritch Knight with Mage Hand and message or sending.
Message. Yeah, sending's the spells. Message is the cantrip. Yep.
Like there are so many other options that other people might have gone with, but you said, hey, I'm a fighter. I'm going to be good at fighting regardless. So let me take some options that are going to give me versatility elsewhere. And
yeah, he's got some utility.
He's been good in literally every situation that I've thrown at you guys. He was at least like good enough at it. He's not necessarily the best in the party, but any situation that you have been in.
Nope, Mac hits the hardest in one shot. Yep. Echo has more attacks because he's a monk and just monks. I mean, you know, but he, you know, as the archer, I can attack things around. You know, we've fought spellcasters, and I was like, all right, I want to make sure I'm going to get them first, and so I could focus fire there. I didn't have to worry about it, you know, being hand to hand, and just mage hand alone, just that. You can do so many things without taking chances. Like it's really good. Also flavors how you play them.
That's true. And that would be like another subclass thing I would talk about too, is there's so many different ways to make a Gish, which is just like some sort of arcane warrior. You know, you could that's just built into the class. The Rune Knight is one kind of like weird way. And honestly, I don't know a ton about the Rune Knight, but what I've read about it is very interesting.
I agree.
The Arcane Archer, you essentially have magic charged shots, which is very cool, and the effects, you don't get a ton of them, but when you use them, the effects are devastating.
Yeah, it's like an arcane spin sort of on the battle maneuvers.
Yeah,
like you said, you don't get as many, but some of them are bigger when you do them.
Eldritch Knight would be the obvious one. You're essentially like a wizard and a fighter at the same time. Pretty freaking cool. And then Echo Knight I would also throw in that category, where you essentially get to like clone yourself for a little bit and
polar master that
you could do. Exactly.
God.
That was a character I wanted to make. But
could you imagine if you do the spacing right, you could cover like a 40-foot line. Like if you want to come through here, you got to go through one of me.
and that's another way that they could tank too, is like you have, all right, well, this is my copy. If he gets hit, he's going to disappear, but I'm not going to take damage from it. And also you have to meet the AC to even hit it.
Which you're going to have a really good AC, even if you're not using a shield.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you could do. And one thing that we haven't even talked about and probably won't talk about because we have other videos on that is how multi-class ready they are. Like if you want to, fighter is probably the most, if not one of the most multi-classed classes out there.
Everyone wants that action surge.
Action surge, fighting style, second wind, like all that stuff you get within the first 2 levels. Like, so there's a ton of stuff that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the most that we'll talk about mechanics wise, but now we're going to talk about some fun stuff. I like this stuff even better.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that makes your character come to life. They go from numbers on a page to, hey, this is like someone I actually care about. They're not even real.
Yep.
Like, how does that work?
Exactly.
Well, this is how.
Yeah. And I would start that off with like, how did they become a fighter? Why are they a fighter? What like, sorcerer, you say they're born with it. Wizards, a lot of time they just, studied really hard.
Yep.
Warlock, they made a pact. But how did you become a fighter?
Yeah, so a fighter is really about their training, and that can be accomplished through various ways. In a way, like when you just said wizard, they're like the martial wizard in that way. Like the wizard has to study and learn magic. Like that's how they get it. They might be gifted at it, just like a fighter might be gifted at it, but it is about study, and it is about training, and it is about learning and basically honing their body into a weapon. Not unlike monks in a lot of ways in that regard. But yeah, it's typically about their, this is the kind of thing you should be asking yourself when you're going to play a fighter. Is my fighter someone who just got in a lot of fights as a kid and learned to win because they had to? Or maybe they're, they joined the military like a soldier. Maybe they took like that classic route, and just when they were going about fighting with their other people, like I just think of like Jon Snow when he was training with the Night's Watch. Everybody there was just like kids, or like, yeah, I'm here to serve. Okay, and he's just like, this is like fighting kids, like this isn't a thing. That's a fighter.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of time it'll feel like that as a fighter. It's like, oh, okay, this is easy. If I'm just this guy, all right, it's an orc. Yeah, it's dead.
Mm-hmm. It's just not a challenge. Like, yeah. Game of Thrones has so many fighters in it. We'll talk about that later.
They do. And Jon Snow would be one of as far as like how he got taught, that would be one of the options I would have there too, is like, did you have some sort of mentor or family member that taught you along the way, and how would that fuel your backstory, right? So like maybe your father taught you, maybe your mother taught you, maybe you had a sibling that you're very close with, or an uncle, or like Jon Snow's uncle who joined the Night's Watch, like that is a Benjen. Very Uncle Benjen. Yeah, he pops up at multiple points, and it's a very important relationship in there, and he might be more of a ranger, but that's irrelevant. Uncle Benjen.
Yeah, I mean, specifically if you're talking about the Night's Watch with them, there's overlap. I mean, they're just like a non-magical ranger but that's more like the function that they serve.
But that's just a fighter with the Outlander background, or just proficiency in survival.
Yeah. But that's the other thing, right? So if I'm just going to talk about Vale for a second and just take a quick side note. So like, he's a fighter, but like he's trained in stealth. He's a smuggler by his background. So like there's a lot of ways you could look at him and be like, he's a rogue. It's like, well, no, he's a fighter. Like, but he just, like you said, he can kind of touch on almost any area that's needed at a moment's notice. And it's just the kind of character I wanted to make. And I just like, I want to make somebody weird mechanically, but you're like, you know what, though, that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that would be how you became a fighter, right? Like whether you taught yourself, or learned as part of the Night's Watch, or just the King's Guard, or maybe you just had a personal moment with an individual. Those would be some ways. Obviously there's other ways too, but next I would say is like, what would be important to a fighter? Like what kind of relationships do you think they would look for if you're playing a fighter, and you went into a town, what are the things that would stick out to them?
Well, I think this would naturally kind of just grow out of how they learned, right? So if they're part of, say, a military organization and you're adventuring in that kingdom or sphere of influence of the organization, whatever it may be, you might just naturally want to see if they have a guild hall or a barracks, whatever meeting place might make sense. Maybe they're looking for people with that insignia of some kind or whatever it might be. Um, Maybe their instructor is somebody that adventures with them, or they're trying to meet them there, right? Like if you take a look at like Lord of the Rings, like the hobbits are looking to meet Gandalf somewhere. Not exactly a direct translation, but he's definitely a mentor to them. And then, you know, I mean, fighters have cool gear, so you're gonna want to make sure you're good with the quartermaster or the armorer, and make
That's
sure
true.
you're in you know, good fighting shape.
It could also be like, well, you know, maybe you had a single instructor, maybe you're an archer, or maybe you're not even an archer, maybe you're like, you use a spear or something, but you were a hunter, and that's how you grew up. That's how you were trained. Well, maybe you're gonna go to the taxidermy place. Maybe that's gonna be important to you. You're
I
gonna go
love
find
that.
out like little things like that. Just tiny little tidbits like that.
Yeah.
It's how you make your character interesting, how you make
Yep.
your character different.
That's so good. I love that.
Every fighter is going to want gear, but if you care about the local wildlife, and you know, what season is it over here? Like, is there an overpopulation of whitetails? Like, is there like what's going on? Oh, you know, like they came by, they ate all my vegetables, they broke my fence. Be like, okay, all right, like, you know, maybe his downtime session is hunting. You
Yeah.
know.
And I love the fighter because the fighter can kind of land in almost any sphere of influence that you'd like them to be, right? Like if they're a noble, they could be a knight. If you know, it's like not that you don't have to be a ranger to care about the wildlife.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that they're in that world just in a different way. Maybe they're just like you said, a trained hunter. Um, I've always thought it would be interesting to play a fighter that has a deep faith, but just isn't given powers like a cleric or paladin. But maybe their faith is just what's grounded them their whole life, and they serve a church organization or whatever you want. You can. A fighter is useful anywhere.
Yeah.
They just are.
That's kind of like, well, maybe not. Never mind. I was gonna say it's kind of like Alistair, but I wouldn't necessarily say he has a deep faith. But someone in that kind of organization, like the Templars or something like that, they're not paladins; they're fighters. They don't have any special magic powers. They just believe in the chantry and the Church of the Maker, and they are going to do everything they could do to carry out that will. They're like crusaders and that aspect. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it is an interesting thing to have characters with something that's important to them and goals that they're going to stick to and ideals like that.
Which I mean that's kind of flows right into our next talking point here is, you know, we're talking about what's important to the class. So like what is when you're making a fighter, like what kind of thing do they value? Because it's just so open ended. You could answer this in so many ways. Like, are they a knight? Do they have like a code of honor that they adhere to? I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah, and honor is probably my favorite one. I love, I like the idea of a noble knight like that, where you have this dichotomy between like arrogance and honor, where it's you know you have your code that you try to adhere to, but you also can't let someone speak to you in a certain way because you are still nobility to an extent, and just dancing the line of that as a character is such an it's a fun concept for me, and that's something that we'll talk on a little bit more when we get into character inspiration, or I'll talk on a little bit more at least.
Yeah.
Another one, the obvious one, would be gold.
Yeah. You're just a mercenary, right? Like,
Yeah,
gotta
you
make a
just,
living.
when
I'm
we
good at
first met,
this.
what did I tell you? If someone offered you to kill me, I'll pay you double.
Perfect.
Okay.
The perfect example.
High Garden. You know,
Yeah.
like, and that actually, I guess, kind of ties into the next one too, with authority and power. Like maybe you want,
Sure.
like you just want some sort of legitimacy, which is a very
Yes.
real thing for throughout history and in a lot of movies and everything. Like, I'm gonna become powerful so that people will respect me. That's, you've seen that a lot before.
Oh yeah, it's like
And
the
that,
classic. The mercenary might be like, I'm really great at fighting. This jackass that I see with this noble title, I grew up with him and I could kick his butt, and I kicked his butt every day in school, and I have to salute every time I see him because he's a noble. No, I want to be in that. I should be there. Like, that could be the mindset, and you will maybe scratch and claw any way you can to get that title or to get that kind of authority. You know, like I said, this, you could just have this wide open berth of how you interact with the world around you.
and if that's the one that you choose, if that's what your character, what's really important to your character, really dive into that. Like, don't do the typical player thing where you're like, oh, what, whatever's best for the party. No, I mean, don't call it party conflict, but player conflict. Character conflict is another thing. But if that's what you want, if it is a specific leader that you're pissed off about, like, why is he king, whatever, well, when there's thoughts of rebellion and that kind of stuff, are you going to continue in the Kingsguard, or are you going to try to convince your friends to take up arms and you're going to join this military side? And that's when you're going to have to work on your charisma as well, and you're going to have to become that inspiring leader so that when the new order happens, you're going to have a place of power.
The Stormcloaks are moving through Skyrim.
And that, like, authority power grab, especially in the instance of, like, I hate this ruler because I know that ruler, that could tie into probably one of the most common motivations for a fighter, which would be like vengeance. Maybe did that ruler do something that made you want to usurp them? Like, are you Braveheart? Did some sort of authority figure like kill your
Yeah.
wife?
Yes, that is. It's just such a basic. Man, fighters can like tie into. They just tie into like some of the most classic stories and emotions that you want to tell. Right? Like, William Wallace. That I'm trying to remember his name from Braveheart. Goodness, like, yes, that motivated a whole rebellion. Which also, I mean, it's so basic to want to do vengeance, but that also flows into, why do you want vengeance? Because love. Maybe you want the authority. Like, maybe take Aladdin, right? He fell in love with Princess Jasmine. I wouldn't call him a fighter, but he wanted authority and power so that he could marry her. Like, that was motivated to adventure out of love. And that is another, just such a core value that just makes us human. That just, it's just such a, that fighter, you could tell such great stories with just such simple, true, and an honest framework. I'm trying to find the right words, but that just feels right.
Yeah.
That's just, yes, this is a fighter. You're fighting for love. You're fighting for vengeance.
Yeah, and that's the love thing could be like in a romantic sort of way, and it also could be like for family or for country too. Like,
Oh yeah,
there's something stupid I was watching on Netflix a while back, and the whole story was about this kid whose village was dying. Essentially, they didn't have any wealth or resources or anything. He's going into the big city. He's pretty good with the sword. Going into the big city, do whatever he can to make money so that he could save his village. And there's a whole corrupt government, and he ends up trying to take down that corrupt government because of things that happen. But all of that it's not even coming from a place of him wanting authority, him wanting power, him wanting gold or or honor or anything like that. It's coming from a place of him loving his family and loving where he grew up, and he wants to protect it and keep them safe.
Yeah, it's born out of a place of need as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
That's necessity. Absolutely. I wrote down for the next one that one of your motivations might be because you want to be the very best, like no one ever was. And that, obviously that's a silly like Pokemon reference.
You got to beat them all, Josh.
Got to catch them all. but that could really be a thing where you just want to gain more power, right? Power could be your motivation, or it could be what you value. So you're just trying to learn from every encounter, and that's a reason for adventuring. That's a reason for joining a party. Be like, oh well, these people seem to get into trouble. I could learn from them. I could grow stronger and get them out of trouble. And there's a lot of fun stuff and a lot of like decisions that you as a person might not make, but your character would make because of that. Like
D&D.
Like
right.
Yeah, like the sword that is messed up and will mess you up and change your alignment and all that kind of stuff. You're like, I shouldn't. You're like, but it'll make me so strong.
My name will be so great. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Which that's kind of perfect, right? So so you pick your motivation. I want to be the very best. Why? And to answer that question, you don't have to do this, but look at your flaw. So maybe you're arrogant. I believe I'm the best, so I now have to prove it. Or maybe you remember every single insult that's ever been thrown your way, so that's what fuels vengeance. It might be so small, but that you remember that barmaid that gave you an attitude or whatever when she put down the your ale the wrong way. So you're gonna do maybe it's not vicious with something like that, but maybe you're gonna do something to like ruin the bar's name or whatever the case may be. Look at your flaw. There can be wonderful storytelling tropes and sparks. We're always talking about find things that just spark your imagination, and your flaw is a well of sparks that can just, oh yeah, this is why I adventure.
Yeah, I love that. And the wanting to ruin that bar, maybe it could literally be as simple as this. You're doing your best to make a ton of money so that you could make a better bar next door because you're that petty.
There you go.
And that's your flaw.
And maybe it's just your side hustle and it's fine. But how many things like in life you then use that to justify owning a bar so that your party has a place to come home to? You have a source of income. Maybe you have employees that can go about and run a lot of busy errands while you're away, whatever the case may be. I need you to find out information on this topic because that's what I need, and here's the money I pay you. I'm the boss.
There's going to be a lot of people out of work when the bar you hate closes down, so you're going to give everyone except for that one barmaid a job. Like, you're helping people,
Exactly. The justification just keeps going. But yeah, use your flaw. Use your flaw.
I think probably most of the great characters and names and stories from our childhood, realistically a lot of them would be classified as fighters, and I think it's great to use them as inspiration.
Yeah.
Too. One of my favorites would probably be, I like to call this one the Patriot, also known as the Reluctant Hero. And that's there's so many ways that this could play out. Obviously, if you've seen the Patriot, this is not a crazy spoiler because this happens within the first 15 minutes of the movie.
And it came out 20 years ago,
And it came out 20 years ago. I think more than 20 years ago at this point. But essentially, Mel Gibson is a veteran from another war. He is trying to stay out of the next war. I'm not even going to use names of, because there's no reason. He's trying to stay out of the war that is currently going on, but is brought to his doorstep, and someone from the opposing side kills his son. When this happens, he is forced into action. He can't just let that happen. So, you know, whether it's because of vengeance, whether it's because he doesn't want that to happen to anyone else, whether it's because he doesn't want his other sons to die that way, he goes out, he kills all of them, and like that's what he does.
At that point, now you're threatening his family. He's got to do something. He can't he can't just sit by and do nothing at that point.
Mm-hmm. And he would have, if it was possible, he would have sat back and let that war happen without being a part of it.
Yep.
And that plays into, so you've heard me, if you're a fan of the channel or a friend of mine, you've probably heard me talk about Red Rising before. Red Rising is one of my favorite book series, and you just need to check out this series. It's incredible, and there's so much that you could take as inspiration from it. The first sentence in the first book is, "I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war." That's essentially this character concept.
Good.
This is someone who, had they not been pushed, they would have been a farmer, they would have been a miner, they would have been anything else, and they wouldn't care about anything else that's happening because it didn't directly affect them. Yeah. But for whatever reason, they were affected, and now they're going to bring hell to your doorstep.
Yeah, because what they do possess is a particular set of skills. And he had done stepped in it this time.
That's another one with literally the exact same thing. I think Gladiator too is one. Maximus from Gladiator is like, yeah, he was a general, but he wanted to retire. They brought war to his doorstep. He said, okay, all right, well, I'm gonna kill you. That's what he did.
My bad. But really, you're bad. And that's the reluctant heroes. The MO. My bad, but you brought this up yourself.
Yeah, you have done that yourself.
Ooh, Obi-Wan, the reluctant hero. I like that. All right, so I know we put together a list here. So what else you got? So you got the Patriot, Darrow, Olycos. We have the Gladiator. Who else you got?
Another one that I love would be Sokka from Team Avatar. And I think this works for D&D so well because of what that party looks like. In the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, you have a party of superhumans and Sokka. You have the Avatar, the master of all the elements. You have one of the best earthbenders, the best waterbender, and then one of the best firebenders. That's your party, plus someone who doesn't have any special powers. He's just a fighter. He was the best fighter in his village, and then when war was brought to his doorstep, another one kind of like that, he set out to get better and to fight in the war, to save his family, to help his sister learn to be a better waterbender, and to help, defeat the Fire Nation.
I was just gonna say, there's something to be said, especially just for the bravery of someone that doesn't have magic, but owns themselves into the weapon that can defeat it anyways, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, in that way, it's almost like a Batman-like character, right? Like I always, and this makes sense, right? So I tend to like to enjoy playing spellcasters, which is why my fighter that I play has some spells, just because I think it's D&D. I want to have fun with that. However, Batman is similar in the fact that it's like, I'm in the Justice League. You got Wonder Woman, you got Superman, you got Aquaman, all these like high-powered people, and it's like, I'm Batman. Figure stuff out. It's like, but he finds a way to be so outmatched in a certain way, but yet still be effective in that world.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love about the fighter. It's, you're not born with Fireball. You're not born with access to anything like that. You are born a normal person, or whatever race you are. Maybe you're an Asimar, you're not a normal person, whatever. But you were born as an individual with no crazy powers, and you just work as hard as you can so that you could be a 20th level fighter with a 20th level wizard, and you could still go toe to toe with the same enemies and potentially do better than them. So that's that's one of the concepts that I really like, is just, you know, you were the best in your small town. Now you're going out. You're going to learn from any master that you could learn from. You're going to try to get any advantage you can, whether it's a boomerang or whether it's cactus juice or whether it's a sword made from a meteor.
Yeah, I mean, and we referenced earlier in the video, Game of Thrones is just chock full of
Oh yeah.
fighters. Probably the most like legendary, I guess. One of the main characters, Jaimie Lannister. I mean, before he we'll just say loses his edge, if you haven't seen it, he is one of the most like accomplished fighters. Even fights Ned Stark, and it's like, who's really good at fighting, and it's just, you're fighting Jaimie Lannister. You don't come back from that. Like, it's just, that's the way it is, and you have that reputation. Her Bronn of the Blackwater, like Josh said in the beginning with Tyrion, it's like, whatever anybody ever offers you, I will double it, because you're just that good, and that much you have that much of an impact on the success or failure of something I try to do. That's a fighter. The Viper, he goes up against the Mountain in that combat. I mean, that's classic barbarian versus fighter right there. His arrogance got in the way there. Maybe we won't get into too many spoilers there, because he had it, Josh.
He didn't know that he had that one feature that when you go down, you come back up with 1 hit point.
Exactly. Yes. Oh man. Safe to say he didn't see that one coming.
Ooh. Another one from Game of Thrones would be Jon Snow, and this is kind of like a different kind of trope or inspiration style. It'd be like Jon Snow, or you could even go with like Aragorn, or maybe like King Arthur, where you are an heir to an empire. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't know it. Maybe there's some sort of reason where you think it's illegitimate or whatever, but that is another classic concept where you are just this really good fighter and you've been doing your thing, but you are also like the last surviving heir to whatever. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe that civilization is completely destroyed, but it still could be a motivation to adventure, right? If your city was destroyed, but you are the last in line, like, and you know, there's no one that lives there or anything. Well, maybe now you need to go to the main kingdom. You have to talk to the king. You have to do a lot of work for him, so that you could go in there and lead an army to clear that out and take over your keep again. I don't know. There's all sorts of stuff you could do there.
You will I would say probably the head of an army is most commonly a fighter, and so it would naturally make sense in this to be able to play someone like that. Even if, say, like your mother or father is the monarch, and you are like that, you know, prince or princess, whoever, whatever you're gonna play, and you're just like the leader, like you're the one who gets out on the battlefield and is commanding the troops. Like, that could be, depending on the kind of game you're playing, that could be a wonderful way to play a fighter. But most of the stuff we've talked about has been hand to hand, and with sword and board or polearm or whatever the case may be, great sword. Legolas from Lord of the Rings, he's a fighter. I know it's usually, you think elf, you think ranger. No, he's a fighter. Seeing him do that like cool thing down the tusk of that giant mammoth and all the extra stuff he's doing action surges. He's a fighter.
Yep.
That's exactly what he's doing. And he's like 62, 63, 64. Poor Gimli's like 7, 8. You know? It's like, yeah.
That's what you could do when you have 4 attacks and action surge. You know,
and you're a ranged fighter. He's a dex-based fighter. That's which is a big inspiration for me playing Vale and wanting to interact mechanically with the game on that level. I think you could easily look at someone like Robin Hood as a rogue, and he's probably a multi-class character, I think, if you were going to flesh him out. But
yeah,
absolutely, he's a fighter. He's an archer, and he He doesn't miss.
That's it. He just it does not miss. Um, yeah, yeah. There's so many great builds like that as far as range type things. I mean, you could look at movies like Saving Private Ryan and look at I totally forget the sniper's name in that, but like he's a fighter, and that's the kind of stuff you could do as a ranged fighter, where you're just like, oh, what is that? 150 feet away? Yeah, no, I could do that with a longbow. You know, like that's
Done.
you could do that.
Absolutely. Which, as a quick, fun little thing, if you're a fighter and you multi-class 3 levels into rogue for assassinate, if you get the jump on someone, action surge, that first round, you're just critting everything. Imagine having 3-4 attacks in a round.
Whoa.
It's a crit, and then you action surge for that first round during when everybody else is surprised.
Oh my god. Wow. Yeah,
You are the ultimate commando. Like,
oh my god.
There you go.
Speaking of commando, that's a Arnold in Commando is a fighter. He's good with any weapon, and he'll just go in and throw a rocket launcher right into your house.
Yep. You're done.
This is something that I kind of mentioned before, where I talked about the dichotomy between like morality and just like a life of like privilege, in like a medieval type sense, I guess, and character concepts that were pop culture or even history, where you could see this would be like Marcus Aurelius, who's a real life person, or back to Red Rising, we'll talk about Cassius Albellona, or really just any sort of knight. I'll just talk about Cassius for a little bit. He is a character who is incredibly wealthy. His family is incredibly powerful. They are the second most powerful family on Mars. And he's a nice dude for the most part. But he also, in his sense of honor, you know, he has a sense of honor where he wants to take care of people. He wants to protect those that need to be protected. But also that honor, he also values himself very much. So if you disrespect him, you might get into a blood feud with him. He might say, the next time that we are in a room together, one of us will be dead. And
yikes.
And this is the type of thing where you're like, well, you know, he's a good person. He wants to do good things. Like, he's trying to help people. And it's like, yeah, but he also has slaves because his family is born to wealth, and that is socially acceptable. And he might have thoughts on that, whether, like, you know, if you really actually talk to him about it, you might get him to be like, yeah, you know what, you're right. That's not okay. But where do you draw that line? And I think that's obviously topics like that are like very difficult for games, and really, I don't want to say it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Yeah, and make sure, of course, you should have all your safety measures in place, particularly right out of the gate with a session 0, which we have a video on that, which if you're not familiar with what that is, and or you just want to have a good session 0, you should check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, exploring these kinds of topics are great. I was just thinking of A Knight's Tale. You know, he wanted to change his stars. That was such a huge moment, and it becomes more special if you don't have access to magic and you don't have access to some of these other things, and the only thing you really have are just your own abilities and training, and you're able to do that. It can become a very special moment when you finally get that title.
I love concepts like that and characters that think of themselves very highly, because when you're able to challenge them like that, it's so much more than, I don't want to say it's more than challenging another character, but when they have a sense of right and wrong, and you're able to rock their world with like a, hey, you're a pretty good dude. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. This thing that you're doing, that your family's doing, that whatever, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be something crazy extreme. But when you do that, like, you could shatter a character like that, and being able to role play that is like that's such a cool and special moment, and you could totally change a character like that. So really don't be afraid to play someone who is a messed up individual that is honorable. Like most knights in history were honorable. They lived to the code of chivalry, but
Yes. Well, so
realistically, there's a lot of messed up stuff going on there.
I feel like we're talking about modern politics at this
Yeah.
point. Anyways,
Anyway,
so you want to play? You're gonna play a fighter. You have all these things going on, and again, I feel like this conversation should take place in a session 0, or at least before the game. Could just be with text messages or whatever. What kinds of things should you be talking to your dungeon master about when you're just kind of putting everything together and setting expectations for how the game is going to go?
So I would definitely, when you're going over what kind of character you want to play and you're coming up with the backstory, before you get really tied to it, married to it, and you don't want to let go of it, talk to your DM, make sure that it fits for the campaign or for the setting. Because like the one we were just talking about, if you're playing like a knight and that knight is maybe they are like, I don't know, ridiculously wealthy or anything like that, and you're about to start a first level game where you're not going to have money and maybe money is going to be an important thing. Well, if you want your character to have wealth, maybe don't do it in this campaign. It might not work. I also think the biggest thing, most important, talk to them about linking to the setting.
Yes. And if maybe your character is wealthy, but you're from a very far land, so you're removed from it, or it would be like a huge deal to be able to access it. It's not that you can't, but maybe it's just a big process, like you have to send a messenger or whatever the case may be. There's probably a way to figure out how to make it happen, but
that was a little bit of a Marcus thing too, because like the family that I had created for him was very, very large, very powerful, very wealthy, but they were all the way north. They were by the spine of the world, and we were nowhere near there.
Yeah, you're in the Sword Coast.
Yeah, there were moments where he's talking to people and he's like, "Well, I'm good for it," and they're like, "Okay, well, it's only good if I have the coin in my hand." Like,
yes. But I like the way you handled that in character, because there were moments where it was just like, "Nah, Marcus is pissed about this." It's like, or irked would probably have been a stronger word. Like, of course I'm good for it. What, you know who I am? Like, you know who my family is? But another thing I think that might be a good conversation to have, especially if you want to go with like the code of honor route. And this is probably going to maybe link up a little bit with, say, overlap with the paladin, is it's probably good to talk to your DM ahead of time about how that might impact like different decisions you're going to make. Is your code of honor born out of something that's personal? Is it born out of something that's an order that you belong to, or something like that? What would breaking this mean? Are you intentionally as if you're a player, do I intentionally want to be faced with decisions where a couple of values I have in my code seem to be in conflict with each other? If you like to explore that, talk to your DM about it. I'm sure they'll find ways to torture you. It's great. But I feel like sometimes those kinds of conversations get overlooked. But it can be a really satisfying kind of experience if you do it right. And that's just going to come out of good communication.
And that's you mentioned, do they belong to like some sort of organization, and is that where the code of honor comes from? And one of the things you mentioned before is like, are they from some sort of like church or something, but they're not a cleric or anything like that? Okay, well, talk to your DM. Are there already religious organizations that exist in the campaign setting that might fit that need? If not, maybe you could get together, you could create one. This is world building, by the way. You create one, decide, is this a small town thing? Does this only exist in the town you grew up in? And now is it culture shock everywhere else? Or is this big? Is this like the Catholic Church in Europe in the medieval times, where it is
just
like
everywhere?
Yeah, it's everywhere and in control of everything, including like politics. It could go both ways, and it could go in the middle too. And another one is like one of the inspirations that we mentioned before is like the reluctant hero, right? You know, war came to your doorstep and now you have to act. You're forced into action. Well, talk to your DM about that, because maybe whatever happened, maybe it was led by some sort of like leader or general in the big bad's army, or the big bad himself or herself. One inspiration that I didn't mention, I'll just mention one more. I know this is a long video, I know we already said a bunch of them, but just hear me out. A character that I would have loved to play, and I was interested in this even before The Mandalorian, but The Mandalorian, you have the child, you have Grogu. Maybe before the campaign started, and this is works even better if it's like some sort of online game and you're going to do like a one-on-one prologue for it, because you're with Grogu and then he gets taken and now you're by yourself. You have no leads. You don't know. You know what the person looked like or what the creature looked like that took him.
Yep.
But you don't know where to find him. Okay, well, I might as well get together with this adventuring party and we're going to do our thing. And I'm going to keep trying to get stronger and keep trying to get power. And every once in a while, I'm going to ask someone that I meet a question about, have you ever seen this symbol before? Do you know what that means? Maybe you're going to come across someone that you know was part of the group that took the child, Baby Yoda. Now you have to, like, suddenly you're going into this crazy rage and you're like, you're running and doing everything you have to do to get answers. And the party's like, whoa, what happened? You're like, all right,
why is this guy bugging out?
It's a long time ago. And again, the reason I mentioned that now too is because that's something you go over with your DM in a session 0 or even before a session 0, because that's something that they might say, well, that doesn't fit this campaign, but like maybe, or, you know, we could figure that out in another one, or here's how we could work that to make it work here. Or they could just be like, yes, absolutely, the person who did that works for the big bad. And then that just ties
now the big bad
in.
has a lieutenant that, or is the big bad, and you're like, that actually fits with what I was going to do anyways. Let's just raise the stakes.
Yeah. Stuff like that. Your DMs are going to be excited for you to be asking questions like that, because I mean, something as specific as that, it's helping them create the story and you know, the actual game that you're going to be playing. If you're talking about organizations, whether it's like a military guild, a you know, Night's Watch or anything like that, that's going to help them with world building and help them make the setting real. So any questions like that, any DM worth their salt is going to be excited about you asking these questions. And it doesn't mean that it's going to work. They might tell you no, and that's okay. That happens sometimes.
Yep.
But you're going to be able to create some awesome things if you work with your DM.
So you often can find some kind of middle ground that makes it work, just like we talked about with the wealthy character. All right, so sure, you're even a prince, but you're really far, and you're off on some kind of like coming of age thing that you have to go out and prove and earn your title or whatever it may be. You can figure it out. Just DM wants to make it work just as much as you do.
Just whatever you do, don't go into a campaign where the DM is like, hey, you're all going to be joining this organization. Just come up with whatever reason you would like to join the organization. And then you go in and you say, I'm joining this organization because I got a knife sent to my house because they killed one of my best friends. And that's the only reason I'm here, to investigate that, and just surprise the DM with that on session 1.
Session 1.
Don't do that. I'm not speaking from experience.
Yeah, no, it did. Yep, we did. We all start somewhere.
It's true.
Well, one of the last things, particularly with a fighter, I think it becomes fun. But one of the last things I think to talk about with your dungeon master is your gear. I mean, if I'm a dungeon master and I have a fighter in my group, I want to know, okay, well, what do you fight with? Do you like ranged weapons? Are you going to use, sword and shield? Or do you want to just wield a maul and just have this brutal, just Hulk smash everywhere you go? You know, that's huge. But another reason why, and I just thought about this, was So for someone like me who tends to enjoy spellcasters, but I want to dip my toe in the water to play a fighter, there's a ton of magic items in the DMG or just can be homebrewed that can supplement the lack of magic in a party just for your character. And if you let the DM know, like, this is kind of out of my comfort zone, if you could just surprise me with a thing or two, that might be something that they can go, okay, I know that the DM, the party magic item wish list, that can go either way. But it doesn't hurt to throw it out there. I mean, they might be able to throw in, sure, yeah, you can get a, Cape of the Mountebank and you have Dimension Door once a day or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let your DM. You don't even. I know a lot of people have problems with the wish list. Personally, I don't have a lot of problems with it. Maybe some, but
don't go crazy with it.
Yeah, don't go crazy with it. But also, just tell your DM things that you would like your character to be able to do, and then you're throwing the ball in your DM's court to be able to decide. All right, well, he wants to be able to do some sort of teleportation, so maybe he's going to be able to have Dimension Door, or maybe he's going to be able to have Misty Step, or something like that. And DMs want you to have a good time. That's what it is. So if you tell them you want to do something more of, I guess I can't speak for all of them, but personally, if it's not game breaking, or if I could think of a way to give you that goal without breaking the game, I'm going to do it. Because, seeing you having a good time is that I'm having a good time. That's...
Absolutely. Everybody's there to have a good time. And if that's going to be something that's going to make the game more interesting, again, you're going to find a way to make it work.
So, man, fighters are boring, huh? So boring that we've been talking about them for, I think, over an hour at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to get edited down to, but it's a longer one. But
leave
it right. But this any character concept, any class can really come to life, and the fighter is one of those things that it's like they're not boring. They're actually they have incredible depth to who they are and why they do the things that they do and how they do the things that they do. It's they're truly special, and it's one of the most classic ways to play Dungeons and Dragons is to pick up your sword, pick up your shield, and head into that dungeon with nothing but your ability to fight.
Yep. And even all of this, all that we've talked about, all the ideas that we've mentioned, this is still just what only two of us could come up with. Yep. So I know that there's more out there, and in fact, I'm going to challenge you to come up with anything, whether it's a new idea that you just had, or whether it's a character you've played in the past, anything like that. Throw that in the comments, let us know, tell us about it, and then we'd love to chat about that.
We hope you had a good time here, and we'll catch you next time. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button,
and let us know which class we should do next.
We're recording whenever you're ready.
Just resizing something.
Giggity.
The notes.
You certainly have a point. Is that a spear in your pocket?
No, I meant to open a new incognito tab to.
Hey, if you got to resize something that way, I don't need to know about it.
All right, there you
go. Okie dokie. Recording again. Boom, boom, boom. Ba, 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 ba.
People are like, what are you thinking about? And I'm just sitting here like,
boom, 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 boom. Thomas the Tank Engine.